independence of Kurdistan, challenges and opportunities. Our first panel today will discuss the future of the Middle East. Our moderator is Professor Ofra Bengio. As we mentioned yesterday, Professor Ofra is head of the Kurdish Studies program at the Moshe Dayan Center for Middle Eastern and African Studies. Baruch haba, Professor Ofra.
Good morning. I'd like to call the participants. Anyone else is missing? Good morning. I'm not David Romano, as you had it yesterday. And we are going to talk about the future of the Middle East, but before I would like to set a few points about what has happened in the 6 years. We are witnessing a man-made tornado, actually a tsunami in the Middle East, man-made, which is much worse than natural-made because it is lasting for 6 years. And we had first the Arab Spring, which turned into the winters, into the Arab winter. Then we have Assad, who excelled more than Saddam Hussein in killing so many of his, slaughtering many of his people. And then we had the rise of Daesh, who built the Suraki land, what we can call Suraki land, and reinvented the Islamic idea of Islam bis-Saif, which has already passed from on the earth and made a lot of abuse of Islam, actually. Then we had the refugees, the wave of refugees all over the region, as has never been before, and maybe the crowning thing is the coming back of Russia to the Middle East. So all of these developments are really changing the face of the Middle East altogether, and we can say that we are witnessing a failure, colossal failure of two systems. The first system which failed dismally is the Arab system, which failed to protect its own citizens, the Arab citizens. More citizens are killed by Arab citizens, by other citizens than any other place or any other nation has been doing this to Arabs. And the second terrible failure is the international community, because, you know, in 2005, they had adopted a very important determination. They called it responsibility to protect against genocide, against crimes of humanity. And where are we standing with this responsibility to protect? They just disappeared, and now we are facing really a very difficult present, and I'm afraid also a future. So for us to discuss this very lunatic region, we have four distinguished speakers. First of all, Dr. Professor Delaware Aladdin, who is a founding member of the Middle East Research Institute, a policy research and think tank based in Erbil, and he was the higher minister in the KRG. Then we have Professor Carol O'Leary. She co-directs the Iraqi Kurdistan Religious Freedom and Human Geography Mapping Project. She is also a member of ISIS study group. Then we have Professor David Pollack. Is the current Kaufman Fellow at the Washington Institute. His research focuses on the political dynamics of a Middle East country in the Middle East. He is the director of Project Fikra, to which I also contribute, right? And The last, but not least, our moderator, or what to be our moderator, David Romano, who is very famous here because of his column in Rudao, and he is the author of the Kurdish nationalist movement, etc. So all of you have 12 minutes, but maybe some other will have more, so let's see. Because it's in Kurdish, and I can't stop him in Kurdish, you know. I don't know how to answer.
Thank you very much. Well, if you want to predict what happens to the Middle East in 12 minutes, you need a palm reader, what we call fatahfal. I will try my best, but I will definitely go over the time. I'll speak in Kurdish, so just to warn you about your headsets. سرتا زۆر سپاس بۆ ئەو داوەتە و سپاس بۆ ڕێخەرانی ئەو کۆنفرانسە و بۆ زانکۆی دۆهۆکی ئەمریکی و بۆ سەرکردەکانی و بۆ تەڵەبەکانیشی بۆ پێشوازە گەرمیەش مای دڵخۆشیە و دەستخۆشیشە هەر لەو دەقەی کە دێ ژوورەوە بۆ دەرەکەوێت کە چ دەستکەوت و چ بەرهەمێکیان خستۆتە سەرزەوی و دوێنێکش پێم باش بوو کە جەنگیز چاندار دڵی خۆشکردن بەوەی کە بەراوردی کرد لە نێوان کۆنفرانسی ئیمڕۆ لەگەر ئەوانی دیداری مێری و سلێمانی بەڵام ئاگاتان لێبی کەوە خەڵکی ماستاوچی بە شایەت ناشن. باسی ئایندەی ڕۆژهەڵاتی ناوەڕاست لە 10 ساڵ و 15 ساڵی داهاتوو حتمما کارێکی ئاسان نییە چونکە ما لە قورسترین شوێنی دنیا دەژین کە دینامیکێت و هاوکێشەی هێز و سیاسەت تێیدا زۆر زۆر ئاڵۆزە. ئەگەر دیمەنی ئەستای ڕۆژهەڵاتی ناوەڕاستیش سیرکەین سیر دەکەی لە چەندین لاوە شەڕی گەورە و ململانێ سەری هەڵداوە چەندین دەوڵەتی 100 ساڵە ئیمڕۆ لاواز بووە بەشێکیان پەچی کەوتووە یعنی بە ئینگلیزی پێڵێن dysfunctional or failed states ژێرخان و سەرخانی چەندین وڵاتەوە خەریکە تێک دەچێ و کاول دەبێ کۆمەڵانێکی زۆری خەڵک دەستیان بە جوولە کردووە و ماڵیان لێ تێکچووە و سەرگەردان بوونە ئیتر ئاسۆیەکی ئاشکرا بەدی ناکرێت لە بۆ ئاشتی چەندین کارکتەری جیهانی و ئیقلیمی و لۆکالی سەریان هەڵداوە کە بڕیاردەرن لەسەر ڕەوتی ڕووداوەکان. جا ئەگەر سەیری ئەو دیمەنە بکەی ئیمڕۆ بیرش لە ئایندە بکەیەوە دەڵێی لە دۆزەخ زیاتر چی بەدواوە دێ. بەڵام لە ڕاستیدا نەخێر ئێمە لە قۆناغێکی گرنگی گواستنەوەین. ئەوەی داهاتی حاڵەتێکی نوێی هاوسەنجی هێز دەبێت دروست ببێ کە لە ڕابردوودا لە 100 ساڵدا خۆی گرتبوو هەبوو کە پێی دەگوترێ Middle East Order لە مەودای 10 ساڵ تا 15 ساڵی تر ڕەنگە بگەینە قۆناغێکی تری هاوشێوە بەڵام زۆر بە جیاوازی کە دیسان هاوسەنجی و پارسەنجی هێزەکان استقرار دەکەن معناوە نیە شەڕ و شۆڕ نامینێ سرعات نامینێ بەڵام استقراری پارسەنجی هێزەکان بە شێوازێک دەبێ کە دەتوانی پێشبینی لە داهاتوو بکەی دەتوانی گوڕ بە پەیوەندی بازرگانی و ئابووری و سیاسی بدەی و حالەتێکی مستەقر دروست ببێتەوە. بەڵام حالەتی گواستنەوەی ئیمڕۆ بە مانای عەرەبیەکەی مەرحەلەی انتقالی یان ئینگلیزیەکەی transitional phase لە بینی قۆناغێکی پێشترە کە 100 ساڵە هەیە. قۆناغی ئەو 100 ساڵە پێشی ئەوە تەواوی شەرقی ئەوسەد بە یەک ئیمپراتۆریەتی عوسمانی و ئیمپراتۆریەتێکی جیرانی لە دیوی ئێران هەمووی حکم دەکرا شتێک نەبوو پێی بڵێن نظامی شەرقی ئەوسەد چونکە حرەکەی هێزی زلهێزی دنیای تێدا نەبوو. لە شەڕی جیهانی یەکەم بەو لاوە کە دوو زلهێزی گەورەی جیهان بەریتانیا و فەرەنسا ئەو وڵاتی ئیمپراتۆریەتی عوسمانیان داگیر کرد وەکو دەزانن بە پێی اتفاق دابەشیان کرد بە شێوازێکی نیمچە عشوایی بۆ چەندین خوردە دەوڵەت. لە هەر یەکەشیاندا هەوڵیاندا دەوڵەتی نەتەوەی عەرەبی دروستکەن Arab Nation States دامەزراوەی مؤسساتی حکمڕانیان بۆ دروستکردن بەس لە ئەخیری حکومەتەکەی کە ڕژێمەکانی کە دایاندەنان بەڕاستی کلاینت ستیت بوون، ڕژێمی پاشکۆ بوون، وەکو نوێنەرایەتیەک بۆ بەردەوامکردنی بەرژەوەندی زلهێزەکان بوو. لەگەر ئەو حالەتەشدا و لەگەر ئەو عشوائیەتەدا نظامێک دروست بوو، پێی گوترا نظامی شەرقی ئەوسەد. ئەو نظامە وەک خۆی مایەوە هەتاوەکو ئێستا ئەو ئاخیرە. سەرباری گۆڕانکاری زۆر گەورە لە دنیا. دوو زلهێزەکەی کۆن بەریتانیا و فەڕەنسا نەمان، دوو زلهێزی ململانەکەی نوێ هاتن، سۆڤیەت و ئەمریکا. لەو بێنەدا شەڕی درێژخایانی وەکو شەڕی عێراق و ئێران، شەڕی ئیسرائیل و عەرەب، چەندین ململانی دی ڕوویدا، ئەو نظامە نەگۆڕا. چەندین ڕژێمی کۆن کە مەلەکی بوون گۆڕان بە ڕژێمی دیکتاتۆری، ڕژێمی عەسکەری، ڕژێمی ناسڕی، وەلایان لە معسکرێکەوە بڵێن لە شەرقەوە بۆ غەرب، لە غەرب بۆ شەرق، وەلایەکانیان دەجوولە، بەڵام نظامەکە هەروە خۆی مایەوە. لە شەڕی ساردی دوای شەڕی جیهانی دووەم ئەو نظامێکە هەبوو جاران بە قووەتر کرا، چونکە لە ڕێگەی تاکە سەرکردە و تاکە دیکتاتۆر و تاکە ڕژێمەوە نفوزی عەسکەری و سیاسی و ئابووری و هەموو بەرژەوەندیەکانی تری زلهێزەکان دەپارێزران. پێویست نەبوو دەست لە سنوور بدرێ، دەست لە نظامەکە بدرێ. تەنانەت کە عێراق کوێتیشی داگیر کرد، زلهێزەکان هاتن ڕێگەیان گرت لەوەی کە نظامی شەرقی ئەوسەد بگۆڕێ، هینانەوە جێگەی خۆی. بەڵام دوای ئەوە شتێکی زۆر مهم ڕوویدا. ساڵی 1989 سۆڤیەت ڕووخا. ئەمە گەورەترین قۆناغ بوو، بە ئینگلیزی مایلستۆن. ئەمریکا بوو بە تاکە زلهێزی دنیا، سۆڤیەت بۆشایەکی گەورەی بەجێهێشت، نظامی عالەمی گۆڕا. یەکەمین شوێنی گۆڕانکاری ئەوروپای شەرقی بوو کە هەستی پێکرا. تەواوی وڵاتانی ئەوروپای شەرقی سیادەی خۆیان دەستکەوتەوە، بوون بە دیموکراسی. دەبوایە ئەو گۆڕانکاریەی نظامی ئەوروپای شەرقی بە هەمان شێوە شەپۆڵەکانی بگەیشت بە ڕۆژهەڵاتی ناوەڕاست، بەڵام وەکو هەموو شتێکی تر زۆر بەدرەنگەوە دەگات، 10 ساڵ و 20 ساڵ دەخانێت تا دەگاتە لای ئێمە. لە ئەوروپای شەرقی وڵاتی ڕۆمانیا ئاخر وڵات بوو ببتە دیموکراتی، لەبەرەوەی وەکو ڕژێمەکانی شەرقی ئەوسەد دیکتاتۆریەتێک بوو، تەنانەت کۆمەلگای مەدەنیشی سڕی بووە. بەڵام وڵاتانی وەکو چێک و هەنگاریە زوو بوون بە دیموکراسی، چونکە لەوانەدا مجتەمەعی مەدەنی هەبوو، جۆرێک لە ئازادی پێشتر هەبوو. جاگە سەیرکە ئێمە شەرقی ئەوسەد هەمومان ڕۆمانیا بووین، بۆیە زۆر زەحمەت نظامی شەرقی ئەوسەد دەکرا بگۆڕێ و شەپۆڵی گۆڕانکاری زۆر بەدرەنگەوە هات. یەکەمین مەشخەڵ، یعنی تریگەر بە ئینگلیزی، شەرارەی یەکەم لە ساڵی 2003 بوو لەگەڵ ڕووخانی سەدام، ڕژێمی عێراق. بەڵام دیسان شەپۆڵی گۆڕانکاری گەورە ڕووی نەدا، هەتاوەکو لە تونسەوە سەری هەڵدا و بەهاری عەرەبی لە 2010 ڕووی لە مینا کرد، ڕووی لە شەرقی ئەوسەد و باکووری ئەفریقیا کرد. وەختێک کە بەهاری عەرەبی گەیشت، گۆڕانکاریەکان بەو شێوەیە بوو کە چاومان پێکەوت، بەڵام لەو ڕۆژەی سۆڤیەت ڕووخا هەتا بەهاری عەرەبی چەندین گۆڕانکاری زۆر مهم ڕوویاندا، دەبێت ئاگامان لێبی، دەبێت تێی بگەین هەتاوەکو پێشبینی لە 10 ساڵ و 15 ساڵی داهاتوو بکەین. لە ڕۆژی لە کاتی بڕین لە ساڵی ڕووخانی سۆڤێتەوە هەتا بەهاری عەرەبی چەند شتێکی زۆر مهم ڕوویدا. یەک، زلهێزی ئەمریکا کە بوو بە تاکە زلهێز، دەبوایە سیاسەتێکی درێژخایانی هەبی بۆ پڕکردنەوەی ئەو بۆشاییە کە سۆڤێت بەجێهێشت. بەڵام ئەمریکا زۆر خەریکی ئەوروپا بوو، زۆر خەریکی چین بوو و زۆر سیاسەتی کوردخایانی 4 ساڵەی تەبەنی کرد و جیاوازیەکی گەورەش هەبوو لە بینی دیموکراتەکان و جمهوریەکان. جۆرج بوشی باوک زۆر بە قورساییەوە هات کوێتی ڕزگار کرد و لە شەڕی کوێتدا هاتە مەیدان بە لەشکرەوە بەس دوای ئەو بیل کلنتن هات 8 ساڵ خەریکی اقتصادی ناوەچی بوو دەستی لە منطقەی شەرقی ئەوسەد تۆزێک دوورە پەرێز گرت تەنها بەقەت پێویست ئیشی دەکرد جۆرج بوشی کوڕ کە هات زۆر بە گورترەوە هاتە مەیدان دەستی لە سیاسەت وەردا بەعکسەوە تەبەنای فەلسەفەیەکی نیۆکۆنزەرڤەتیڤی کرد داینە بە هاندانێکی بڵین چەندین ئەکادمی تینکتانکەکانیان کەوە وەکو دۆمینۆ دەستکاریەکی گەورەی نظامی شەرقی ئەوسەد بکە بە جۆرێک لەسەر بنەمایەکدا بڕێژێتەوە کە سەردەمیانە بی دیموکراسێتێک بڵاو بێتەوە بۆ ئەوی بەرەنگاری تێرۆریزم بێتەوە و بەرژەوەندی ئەمریکی باشتر پارێزێ و ئەو نظامە چەقبەستووی کۆن بگۆڕێ واشیان تەسەوڕ کرد بە داگیرکردنی عێراق وەکو دۆمینۆ ئەفێکت ئەو شتە ڕوودەدا بەڵام لەو لاوەشتی گەورەتر ڕوویدا بۆ ئەویش هێزی ئەقلیمی و ئەو نظامە چەقبەستووی کۆن زۆر بە قووەتتر بوو لەوەی کە جۆرج بوش بتوانی دەستکاری بکە ئێران هەتا ئەو کاتە زۆر بە قووەت بوو کەوا توانی بەرەنگاری ڕەوتی نوێی ئەمریکی بکە تەجروبەی عێراقی سەردەمی جۆرج بوش ئەوەندە قورس و ئەوەندە گرانبەها بوو کە ئۆباما هات نەیویست ئەو تەجروبەیە دووبارە بکاتەوە دەستی لە شەرقی ئەوسەد هەڵگرت دەستی لە عێراق هەڵگرت دوورە پەرێز وەستا 2011 ئاخر جوندیشی کشاندەوە تەرکیزی کردەوە سەر اقتصادی وڵاتەکەی و زیاتر چین و شەرقی ئاسیا و تا حدێک رووسیا ئەو دەست هەڵگرتنەی ئۆباما زۆر بۆ ئێمە گران کەوت لە بۆ شەرقی ئەوسەد گران کەوت تەنانەت کە بەهاری عەرەبیش لە سەردەمی ئۆباما هات زیاتر وەکو چاودێرێک بوو دەیوت leading from behind لە دواوە قیادە بکە بەڵام لە ڕاستیدا leaving it behind یعنی هەرڕاست دەستی لێ هەڵگر بوو لە عێراقیش ئەو زەریبەیەی کە ئێستا دەیدێن بەشێکی ئەو دوورە پەرێزی ئەمریکا بوو کەواتە ئەگەر بیر لە داهاتوو بکەینەوە دۆناڵد ترامپ دەکرێت بنەمای 10 ساڵی داهاتوو لەو 4 ساڵەدا ڕسم بکە بەڵام ئێمە ناتوانین بزانین دۆناڵد ترامپ چۆن ئەو سیاسەتەی دادەڕێژی چونکە ئیشارەتی متەناقض هەیە دەیخوێنینەوە لە ئەمریکا لەلایەکەوە دۆناڵد ترامپ پشتگیری لە پشتگرتنی دەڵێ پیاوی بە قووەت حتمما ژنی بە قووەتیش سەرکردەی بە قووەت بەس مەبەستی لەوە عەبدولفەتاح سیسی و ڕەجەب تەیب ئۆردوغان و ڤلادیمیر پوتین و ئەو کەسانەیە و هەروەها گەڕانەوەشە بۆ ئالیەتی شەڕی ساردی کۆن لە هەمان کاتدا داعمی رووسیا دەکا داعمی تورکیا دەکا داعمی ئیسرائیل دەکا و دژایەتی ڕەنگە ئێران بکە بە حسابی قسەکانی شەرنیە بیکە و دژایەتی ئەو ئیتفاقە نوێویە دەکا جاگەر بێت و بتەوێت پێشبینی بکە ئایا سیاسەتە ڕاستەقینەکەی واقع لە دوای هاتنی ترامپ بۆ سەرحکم چی دەبێ ناتوانی چونکە زۆر متەناقضات هەیە نەچۆتە وردەکاری هەر بە عمومیات قسەی کردووە ناتوانی پێشبینی بکەی بەڵام ئەگەر وەکو کۆماریەکانی تر دەست لە شەرقی ئەوسەد وەربدا زۆر کاریگەر دەبێت زۆر شت دەهەژێنێ و ئەگەر جاری دووەمیش هەڵبژێردرێتەوە 8 ساڵ ئیدارەی کۆماریەکان کاریگەر بن لەو منتقەیە وەکو دیموکراتەکان وەکو ئیدارەی ئۆباما نابێ بەڵکو زۆر شت دەهەژێنێ گۆڕانکاری دووەم لە رووسیایە کە میراتگەری سۆڤێت بوو رووسیا لەبەر ئەوەی مشکلی داخلی خۆی هەبوو زوو دەستی هەڵگرت لە ڕۆژهەڵاتی ناوەڕاست بەڵام چاوەڕێی دەرفەتی دەکردبێتەوە ئەو دەرفەتە سووریا بۆی ڕەخساند تەحالوفی رووسی لەگەر ئێران بۆی ڕەخساند لە ڕێی ئێرانەوە هاتەوە شەرقی ئەوسەد و لە داهاتووشدا دەیەوێ دەنگ و ڕەنجی هەبی و تەئسیر لە ڕەوتی ڕووداوەکان بکە و مستەقبەل ڕەسم بکە بەڵام زۆر دوورە پەرێز بۆ زۆر درێژ لە غەیری سووریا و ئێران کەمن ئەو وڵاتانەی زیاد پشت بە لە ڕووی ئەمنی و سیاسی و کاریگەری نفوزەوە پشت بە رووسیا بەستن بۆیە رووسیا ڕەنگە نەتوانێت بەقەد ئەوانی تر سیاغەی ئایندەی شەرقی ئەوسەد بکە لە غەیری ئەو دوو زلهێزە گەورەیە لە مەنتقەشتی گەورە ڕوویدا لە ساڵی 79 شۆڕشی ئیسلامی کە هات ئێران مەشغوڵ کرا بە شەڕێکی درێژخایەن بەڵام سەرباری ئەو شەڕە سەرباری هەموو شتێک ئێران توانی ببتە هێزێکی گەورەی ناوچەیی نفوزی تەشەنە پێ بکە بگاتەوە حەدەی ئیستیفادە لە هەموو دەرفەتێک و بۆشایەکی ئەو مەنتقەیە وەربگرێ تا ئەو ڕادەیەی ئێستا لە 4 پایتەختدا خاوەنی بڕیارە بڕیاری سیادی لە 3-4 عاسیمەی عەرەبی وەرگرتوتەوە بە عێراق و سووریا و یەمەن و بگرا لە لوبناندا لەسەر مێزی بڕیارداندایە کەواتە ئێران ڕۆژێک لە ڕۆژان ئەمریکا دەویست سنووری بۆ دانێ لەگەر ئیسرائیل لە 2006 هاتنە سەرەوەی لێشی دەن بەیەکەوە سنووری بۆ دابنێن بەڵام کە ئەو دەرفەتیان نەقۆستەوە 10 ساڵ لە دوایەوە ئێستا ئێران بۆتە نەک تەنها گەورەترین هێز هیچ هێزێکی ئەقلیمی ئێستا وجودی نییە کە بتوانێت بەرەنگاری ئێران بێتەوە ئێران لە شەرقی ئەوسەد ململانێ لەگەر ئیسرائیلیش دەکات لەگەر ئەمریکاش دەکات کەواتە لە 10 ساڵی داهاتوودا ئێران بڕیاردەرێکی زۆر مهم دەبێت لە ڕەوتی ڕووداوەکان و سیاغەکردنی نظامی شەرقی ئەوسەتی نوێ و نفوزەکەشی دەبێت ئیدارەی لەگەر بکرێ نەک ئینکار بکرێ ناتوانانی ئینکاری ئەو تەسیرەی ئێرانی بکەی دەبێت حسابی بە بکەی ئیدارەی لەوە بکەی تورکیا لە چەندین ساڵدا لە 80 ساڵدا وڵاتێکی لاواز لە هەناودا لاواز و پڕکێشە بوو بەڵام لە 2002 بەو لاوە گەیشتە لوتکەی قووەتی اقتصادی کە نفوزێکی سیاسیشی لە ڕێی ئەو تەحالفاتەی هەبوو لە ڕێی حرکاتی ئیسلامی لە ڕێگەی اقتصادی خۆی و تجارەتی زۆر زوو سەری هەڵدا لە 10 ساڵدا بوو بە هێزێکی مهمی ناوچەیی بەڵام کێشەی داخلی خۆی ئێستا ئەوەندە مەشغولی کردووە سیاسەتە خارجیەکەشی تەسیر لێ کردووە ڕەنگە ئەگەر بێت و مشکلەی ناوەچی حەل نەکە ئەستێرەکەی ڕووی لە بەرەو خوار بێ لە 10 ساڵی داهاتوودا بەقەد ئێران نەتوانی ئەو شەرقی ئەوسەتە ڕەسم بکە بەڵام توانای ئەوەشی هەیە کە هێزێکی گرنگی ئیقلیمی جیۆپۆلیتیکێکی بەقووەت و اقتصادێکی بەقووەت کە بتوانێ بەرەنگاری داهاتی بێتەوە I did warn you that I will go a few minutes over because I'm only halfway. Forgive me. Well, okay, I'll give you hope. Okay, I can stop any time. I don't mind. But I'll
1 minute more.
Okay, right. Okay. لا تركيا بولاوا بين سر السعودية لرجي سامان ومسألة هوية قومية عربية ولسر مسألة إسلامية كي سودي لو قلت وتأثيري زور لسر برياري شرقي أو صدقات سندين ولاتش تتواني برياري عن بودا لخليج زور مهمة تأثيري لسوريا لليبيا لهم ولاتانا ليمن بويا سعودية بواسطة سامان وتحالف كي لقر أمريكا بردوام دبيلا تأثيري لصياغة كردني شرقي وسط بو أوي آخر دقة بتشاشي بكار بينهم دبي باس لنون ستيت أكتر بكين نون ستيت أكتر أو نادولتانيين دكريه غير دولتي بن كصفتي رسمي ودستوريان هي وكو هرمي كردستان و نون ستيت سب ستيت ونون ستيت هبن نون ستيت كا أو غير دولتيان هنديشان وكو حشد الشعبي وكو حزب الله لبناني وكو ميليشياكاني تر شرعيتي كومالاتي وسياسيان هي بلام شرعيتي دستوري قانونيان ضعيفة العراق داخلي كدستوري صفتي قانوني وردقرن بلام زياتر هزيشي سياسي وكومالاتي وانا تأثيري أنا صار ودا وقالك زورا بيت قال وانا هزي تنروي تيرور وانا شحنا كبونة أجدهاية سربخو توانای بڕیاردانیان هەیە توانای گۆڕانکاریان هەیە توانای سیاغکردن و داڕشتنی شەرقی ئەوسەتی نوێیان هەیە تەئسیریان نظامەکەن ئەگەر تەماشا بکەی ئەو وڵاتانی سەبستەیتن یان نۆن ستەیت ئاکتەرز لە مەودووە هەر تەنها ئەوە نییە پرۆکسی بن بە نیابەت شەڕ بکەن خۆشیان دەسەڵاتی بڕیاردانی محەلیان هەیە ئیش لە گەورەکانی شتێک دەدەن جا ئەگەر بێت و سەیری ئەو هەموو دەینامیکە تێکەڵە بکەین لە ئاستی جیهانی ئیقلیمی لۆکالی ئەو هەموو تێکەڵکێشانە بکەی و جابرێ ئەو مستەقبەلەی داهاتوو چی بەسەر دێ مستەقبەلی داهاتوو هاوسەنجیەکی نوێی پارسەنگێکی نوێی هێز دروست دەبێ کە ئیستیقرارێک دەکا معناوە نییە شەڕ بەردەوام نابی بەڵام شتێکی وا دروست دەکا کە مەودای 10 ساڵ بتوانی پێشبینی بکەی سیاسەتی بۆ دابڕێژی جا پرسیاری گەورە هەیە ئایا لەو گۆڕانکاری گەورانەی نظامی نوێ سنوور دەستکاری دەکرێت یان نا بەڕای من تاکە کاندیدی بۆ دەستکاریکردنی سنوور لە 50 ساڵی داهاتوو بەس هەرێمی کوردستانی عێراقە زەحمەتە کیانێکی تر یان بۆ کیانێکی تر کیانێشتر لە وەزعەدا بێت دەستکاری سنوور بکە یان خەڵک بۆی بکە تەنها هەرێمی کوردستان ئێستا گەیشتێتەوە قۆناغی کە دەتوانێت پێشبینی لەوە بکار ڕۆژێک لە ڕۆژان بیکە ئەویش دەبێت قووەتی داخلی بەقووەتکە لە ناوماڵیدا سیستمێکی حکومڕانی وایە هەبێ بەرەنگاری هەڕەشە ببێ سەرکردەکانی شەر نییە کۆک بن لەسەرەوەی لەسەر هەموو شتێک ڕازی بن و بەیەکەوە دابنیشن بەڵام دەبێت لەسەر نەخشەڕێگای بەدەوڵەت بوون و نەخشەڕێگا و ڕوانگەیەکی دێشخایەن کۆک بن جا لێرەدا ئەگەر سەیری شەرقی ئەوسەد بکەی ڕەنگە سنوور دەستکاری نەکرێن بەڵام هاوسەنجێکی نوێ حتمما دێتە کایەوە ئەگەر زوویان درەنگ ڕەنگە بە ئاسانی لەدایک نەبێ ڕەنگە 10 ساڵ تا 15 ساڵ بگرێ 20 ساڵی بووە بەڵام لە ئەخیری هەردەبێ بیگەینێ بۆیە جێگەی تەفاعول و دڵخۆشیە هەمووی هەر ڕەشبینی نییە سوپاس بۆیەوەش
Good morning. I would like to thank the President and the Provost for their kind invitation to participate in this important and timely event. And very much I would like to thank the Chairman, Masroor, who truly his vision and dedication ensured that the American University of Kurdistan would become a reality. And I hope that his time in D.C. Had something to do with the fulfillment of this vision. So today, I would like to highlight 3 topics that I believe are important to the future strategic calculations of the Kurdistan region's leadership as we enter a new phase in American foreign policy making under, yes, a Donald Trump administration. First, I'd like to briefly outline a context for you in which to better understand foreign policy making in the incoming Trump administration. My framework for analysis is based on my discussions with Trump's foreign policy advisors, members of his transition team, as well as my work for U.S. CENTCOM HQ since 2012, including with General Mattis, okay? So, President-elect Trump's view of foreign policy, in my view, can be summarized as follows. We are not here to do regime change. Rather, our focus is on business investment and counterterrorism. In other words, for Trump, there are 2 key foreign policy pillars: business development and counterterrorism. In my view, American foreign policy under Trump will attempt to find a balance between counterterrorism and expanding the American economy. Trump believes that George W. failed by trying to accomplish too much, and President Obama failed by being too cautious. For Trump, Bush failed at nation building in Iraq and Afghanistan, failed to achieve democracy in Egypt, and failed to resolve the Israeli-Arab conflict. Obama, on the other hand, in the Trumpian view, withdrew prematurely from conflicts, drew red lines he later abandoned, declared an unachieved pivot to Asia, and granted carte blanche to Putin's hegemonic ambitions. The incoming Trump administration, and this is important for your planning, will continue to follow the Obama administration's current policy for at least the next 6 months. We will not see any significant changes in policy before summer 2017. Foreign policy under a Trump presidency might best be understood as a medley. And what's a medley? A medley is a mixture. Think of salad with different kinds of lettuce. That's a medley. So, foreign policy under a Trump administration might best be understood as a medley of various Republican foreign policy worldviews come together in one administration in an effort to try to balance the various positions in the Republican Party. What do I mean by arguing that we can understand Trump's foreign policy as a medley? Think of the Herbert Hoover era. The business of America is business, combined with the Reagan mantra, best captured by Sec Defense Caspar Weinberg, channeling Teddy Roosevelt, who famously argued that the U.S. should speak softly and carry a big stick. Under Reagan, this evolved into the idea of the U.S. as a, quote, looming threat, close quotes. In other words, don't make us do it, but we will take action if we have to. Combined with George Bush, who spoke of the U.S. as, quote, the head of the spear, close quotes, focused on stopping global terrorism. And here we need to take note, of Trump's theory of management, or what it takes to be a strong CEO. Trump thrives on having his advisors engage in hard-fought debate around him, and as the chief adjudicator, that's how he thinks of himself. Trump listens to all sides and then makes his own decision. So to summarize, we have two paradigms at work here. One is a foreign policy that favors stability, not chaos, and thus rejects regime change scenarios. The other is a decision-making process that thrives on input from competing policy recommendations, leading to adjudication on his part. A well-known policy direction, we all know this, that's emerging in this regard is a more aggressive posture towards Iran in multiple spheres, from the economic to the military. This does not imply that Trump will abandon the nuclear agreement or support regime change in Iran, something that old neocons left over from the George Bush administration, like John Bolton, would like to do. It does mean that Trump will draw on both traditional tools, like enhanced sanctions, and less traditional tradecraft as well, including possible covert actions. So let me move to what I call the twin pillars of Trump's foreign policy. There are two areas of foreign policy responsibility in Trump's mind, two areas of focus that he's established for the Middle East. One pillar is the obvious national security and military issues pillar that will fall to, obviously, General Madison Flint. The other area of responsibility will focus on the broader messaging and strategy crafting side of foreign policy making that will be handled by Tillerson, if confirmed, and whoever his deputy may be, and others whom I will discuss, whom you likely have never heard of. I will note here that John Bolton was on the very short list for Deputy Secretary of State. However, in my opinion, this now seems unlikely with Tillerson coming in, whom I would describe as a hyper-realist, given that Bolton is a strong advocate for regime change in Iran. Bolton is also, as you well know, a strong supporter of Kurdish independence, so we should watch and see if he goes into the administration. Finally, we can't underestimate the effect of the recent briefing that Trump and his team received on North Korea. This is a very important issue. Based on these briefings, Trump and his team believe that by the end of their first term, North Korea could well be able to attack Los Angeles with ICBMs. Therefore, General Mattis, General Flynn, and their advisors are now looking at secondary sanctions on China or even limited military action. And this may mean that President-elect Trump will pivot to Asia in a way that President Obama did not, based on confrontation, not trade. I'll now turn to my second topic and spend a few minutes highlighting some less well-known but extremely influential advisors, incoming advisors, who will focus on the Middle East. George Papadopoulos, his mentor Nicholas Noe, and Dr. Yalim Poblente, the three, and I will also spend a moment on Walid Faras, who is known, more well-known, via Fox News and other conservative channels, because he's been briefing Trump since the day he announced he was going to run for president. George Papadopoulos, very interesting figure, is a businessman like Trump with an expertise in energy strategy. He obtained a master's degree from London University in 2010. Papadopoulos adopted another not well-known figure named Nicholas Noe, whom I'll get to, as his mentor several years ago, after having come to know Noe through attending several of Noe's cultural exchange programs for executives in Beirut, Abu Dhabi, and Tunis. It was Papadopoulos who brought Noe to the attention of President-elect Trump, and Papadopoulos, like Walid Faras, has been with Trump as an advisor from the beginning. Note, Papadopoulos was also an advisor shortly to former presidential candidate Ben Carson. He also worked as a research fellow at the neoconservative Hudson Institute located in D.C., and he's a strong, and these are not my words, but others, Greekophile. In other words, a very strong supporter of Greek culture, the Greek country. His recent advisory work, as some of you may know, focused on how Greece, Cyprus, and Israel can manage the natural gas discovery in the Eastern Mediterranean. In his view, Israel should use the natural gas it found in the Leviathan field offshore in the Eastern Med to build bridges to Greece and Cyprus and avoid dealing with Turkey at all costs. Any extra gas could be sent to Egypt, which Papadopoulos said already has the liquefied natural gas plants for importing this gas. What does this mean? Okay, it means that Papadopoulos may end up in conflict with those who advocate working to strengthen ties with Turkey. On the other hand, his view is consistent with the view of Trump and his foreign policy team that U.S.-Egyptian relations are to be strengthened and developed in order to reestablish Egypt as the natural leader of the Arab world in opposition and opposed to Saudi Arabia. It's worth looking at General Flynn's approach to Turkey in this regard. General Flynn, as we all know, is a strong supporter of Turkey, who authored an opinion piece in The Hill on Election Day, arguing that Turkey is, quote, our strongest ally against ISIS, close quotes. He also called for the extradition of Fethullah Gulen and for the need to, quote, adjust our foreign policy to recognize Turkey as a priority, close quotes. Some in Trump's circles suggest that a top priority of the incoming administration will be to extradite Gulen, who, by the way, lives in Pennsylvania and is accused of mounting the coup attempt, as we all know, against the Erdogan government, a charge Mr. Gulen denies. Papadopoulos has also written that the United States should station a fleet of warships in Crete and that Cyprus should join NATO. Both options, of course, are highly threatening to Turkey and its position. For Papadopoulos, regional economic cooperation between Israel and Cyprus should be the guiding principle that anchors Israel economically to Europe, avoiding Turkey altogether. In his view, Israel's energy exports can serve as the basis for enhancing strategic relations between Israel and Egypt, as well as serve as the foundation for political and security cooperation with Greece and Cyprus. Now, while I can't personally think of a strategy more certain to further drive a wedge between Turkey and the U.S., nevertheless, Trump thrives on competing viewpoints, and we must keep that in mind. Personally, I don't see General Flynn, General Mattis, or Mr. Tillerson, for that matter, supporting the Papadopoulos view, except on Egypt. Both Flynn and Mattis value Turkey as a U.S. partner and NATO ally, and Egypt as a check on Saudi hegemony in the Arab world. In summary, Papadopoulos brings with him the business perspective, a focus on energy and trade, and a clear antipathy toward Turkey under Erdogan. Now, Nicholas Noe, interesting guy, co-founder of the Beirut-based MideastWire.com and the cultural exchange program called The Exchange. He's also the editor of a book called Voice of Hezbollah, The Statements of Sayed Hassan Nasrallah. He went to high school with Eric Trump and has been directly involved in the transition meetings taking place at Trump Tower. Noe is not tied to any specific ideology in terms of his foreign policy thinking, which in my view makes him attractive to Trump. In order to understand where he's coming from, I recommend that you read his August 2016 article in the Huffington Post entitled, quote, The False, Perilous Choice of a Limited, in quotes, American Bombing Campaign in Syria. Noe makes a strong case that any military escalation on the part of the U.S. in Syria would lead to dangerous and unforeseen consequences, in direct opposition to the view of General Flynn and John Bolton, not to mention Senator John McCain. If brought in with Papadopoulos, Noe would likely be on the opposition side of Flynn and any incoming neocons from the Bush W era on the issue of Saudi Arabia. Flynn, like Bolton, is convinced that the Saudis were part of 9/11, i.e. that high-ranking members of the House of Saud, including now deceased Prince Nayef, then head of the Ministry of Interior, kept key intelligence from the Bush W. administration. Flynn is very focused on this and is said by his close advisors to be, quote, gunning for the House of Saud. In fact, it can be argued, and it has been argued by Flynn's advisors, that Flynn's use of highly inflammatory anti-Islamic rhetoric is shorthand for Saudi Arabia. Flynn, as you may know, believes in shaping the battle space. In the case of Saudi Arabia, this would mean declassifying and leaking U.S. intelligence on the Saudi role in 9/11 to the American public. This is where Egypt and Turkey become very interesting because both will benefit from a sharp U.S. tilt away from Saudi. Egypt's al-Sisi, no fool is he, very early on in the presidential cycle, made a strategic decision to warm up to Trump. And as one Trump advisor put it, al-Sisi is Trump's kind of partner, a get-it-done, low-drama kind of guy. The long game for Flynn and his faction is to go after the House of Saud and at the same time adopt a more aggressive posture toward Iran, which we all know. In summary, for Flynn, the House of Saud is an enemy of the U.S. and therefore a target because he sees the behavior of the regime as a direct threat to the United States. The role that I believe Trump has envisaged for Papadopoulos and for Noe, if he accepts Trump's invitation to join the administration, comes out of the second of the two pillars of foreign policy making that I have described above. While national security and military issues will, of course, be led by Mattis and Flynn, the other pillar that focuses on messaging and strategy crafting will very likely be led by Papadopoulos in coordination with incoming Sec State Tillerson, if he's confirmed. Now, what about Dr. Yaleem Poblente? Not a name we hear much about, except if we follow Congress. Along with Nicholas Noe, Dr. Yaleem is one of the least known of the many names being considered by Trump and his closest advisors. She served for close to 2 decades on the staff of the Committee of Foreign Affairs in the U.S. House of Representatives, including as Chief of Staff and Staff Director for Representative Ileana Ross-Lehtinen. Poblente was named by Trump as a member of his National Security Landing Team. Several of these teams, as you may know, have already started meeting with federal agencies and departments in preparation for the inauguration. When you think of Dr. Poblente, think sanctions. Among other things, she helped push for and enforce sanctions related to Cuba and Iran, including the Iran sanctions law that the Senate recently voted to extend for another 10 years. She's married to Jason Poblete, who is an attorney specializing in international and regulatory work, who also may go into the Trump administration. She will surely align herself with General Mattis and Flynn in support of a much more aggressive and robust U.S. policy towards Iran. What about Walid Faris? I'll only point out that he was well known in the lead up to the Iraq War as part of the Chalabi group. He's a Lebanese Christian, was a strong supporter of Samir Jaja, a Lebanese warlord, and that he's been a foreign policy advisor to Trump since Trump announced he was running. He was also a top foreign policy advisor to Romney. He would naturally align with the conservatives, those focused on going after Iran. Okay, one moment. Let me just have one moment for my conclusion. I'm almost done. I'll do my very best. Okay. The third and final topic I want to address is how key foreign policy and military advisors in the incoming Trump administration understand the U.S. Kurdistan relationship. Now, I am not aware of what Dr. Galbraith said, that Flynn has ever publicly expressed support for Kurdish independence, while he has expressed public support for the Kurds and for Iraqi Kurdistan. John Bolton has expressed publicly support for an independent Kurdistan. So whom should we be looking at in terms of how the incoming first tier of the Trump administration will situate the KRI in their strategic planning? As of now, and I'm being as honest as I can based on my discussions with Trump's advisors and transition team, that they don't think about the Iraqi Kurds right now except in terms of being an extremely reliable and effective counterterrorism partner against ISIS. And that's how they basically view the YPG as well, despite protests coming from Turkey. And as I mentioned again, they're not going to make any dramatic changes at all until at least 6 months from now or summer 2007. Mattis and Flynn, of course, have extremely good impressions of the Iraqi Kurds based on the evolving situation in post-Saddam Iraq. It goes without saying, in my view, however, that the incoming administration will assume that the Iraqi Kurds are reliable partners who will continue to deliver when asked by the U.S. to do so. In summary, for the incoming administration, in my view at this point of time, the KRI represents a U.S.-friendly indigenous counterterrorism force. What about the rest of Iraq? This is an interesting point. General Flynn is, in particular, very hostile to the government in Baghdad. As you know, it was General Flynn who made JSOC, the famous Joint Special Operations Command, into the powerful machine it is today, in order to go after whom? Who did he want to go after with JSOC? The so-called special groups, or Shia militias, and their Iranian sponsors starting in 2006. General Flynn and Mattis' perspective on Iran was shaped by what those special groups did. On Syria, Flynn wants to work with Russia, the YPG, the Sunni Arab opposition, and Turkey to rout ISIS, and to stabilize the now chaotic terrain west of the Assad statelet, made almost entirely Arab, tribal, and Sunni. It's important to recognize that the root cause of the antipathy of Flynn and Mattis toward Iran, again, is their experience in Iraq. Flynn and Mattis both witnessed the atrocities inflicted on U.S. soldiers by Iran-backed Shia special groups. Mattis, as you well know, is famous for his aggressive determination to take on American foes, particularly Iran, and that lost him his job as commander of CENTCOM. And again, I would note that I am told that Flynn's actual interaction with Muslims in Afghanistan and through JSOC in Iraq was positive. In other words, inconsistent with his more, insulting recent tweets against Islam and the Muslim world. And again, it's important to keep Trump's core message in mind. We are a pragmatic, business-focused administration. Play well with us, and we will play well with you. And again, just to summarize, the Trump foreign policy team, as it now exists, thinks about the Iraqi Kurds as a strong counterterrorism force, loyal to the Americans they work with. And in this regard, it's important to note that they look at al-Sisi in the same way, i.e. as a friend of the U.S. in the Middle East, a region where generally the incoming is understood to have very few friends, mainly to be hostile to the U.S. The incoming administration will not abandon its CT partners, including the Kurds. However, in contrast to the Obama administration, it will draw red lines with these partners, in particular with the PYD PKK, if the YPG were to attempt to link Kobani with Afrin. And let me just, in the interest of time, skip to my conclusion. Yes. I wish I were speaking in Kurdish. Okay. In conclusion, I see no danger in the KRA, of course, entering into talks with Baghdad on self-determination, independence, and statehood. However, I don't believe that the Trump administration will be ready, certainly not in the first 18 months or so, to actively support Kurdish independence, given what else they will be dealing with in terms of foreign policy, including China, North Korea, and all the domestic policy challenges, given the promises Trump made in that regard. Thank you. And my paper, I assume, will be made available.
Sure. Yeah. Okay. زور سپاس بیانی باش من دلوم خوشه بلام زمانی کردی آسانیه زور زحمته. So I'm going to switch to English, and I want to express my very sincere thanks to all of you for hosting this conference and for inviting me, and to my fellow panelists and moderator for such an interesting discussion. I'm honored to be here. I would like to begin by responding to some of the things that Carol said about the incoming Trump administration. In general, I agree with her about, in my own assessment, based on my own contacts with the new administration team, about some of the key points, and in particular about their hostility to Iran and their determination to change U.S. policy in that regard. Not so much on the nuclear file, again, as Carol said, I agree, but more on Iran's other regional ambitions, including here in Iraq. I don't agree, however, with the point that was made about General Flynn and his attitude in particular towards Saudi Arabia. I don't see that at all. I know the guy, I know his advisors. He is obviously very hostile toward jihadis and terrorists, but not to the Kingdom of Saudi Arabia, in my view. And so I don't expect, and in particular because of the importance of Saudi Arabia to the world energy market and the nomination of an oil man as Secretary of State, I can't imagine that the Trump administration would jeopardize U.S.-Saudi relations in any way. I would like to say another word before I get into the main subject of my presentation about surprises. Trump's election was a surprise. In fact, almost everything that's happened in the world in the last 5 years has been a surprise. Not just to me and probably to most of you, but to the CIA and to the American government as a whole, and to most pollsters, and to many governments and experts all around the world. So in trying to predict even the near-term future of the Trump administration or of the Middle East or of Kurdistan, I think it is very good advice, maybe the best advice that I have to offer, to be very humble, very modest, very cautious in thinking that we know what's going to happen and how different governments are going to react to the new surprises that are almost certainly around the corner. And in that, just to make the point very personal and strong, just this morning I woke up to hear 2 new surprises from the incoming Trump administration. They don't have anything directly to do with Kurdistan or with Iraq, but they do have something to do with his Middle East policy. And people did not expect them, and they're potentially very significant changes in U.S. policy. One is already, before he's even president, one is the nomination of a guy named David Friedman to be the new U.S. ambassador to Israel. Friedman is an outspoken supporter of Israeli settlements in the West Bank. And he is a strong proponent of actually implementing right away Donald Trump's pledge to move the United States Embassy in Israel to Jerusalem from Tel Aviv. This is the guy that Donald Trump has just announced is going to be his nominee to be the new U.S. ambassador to Israel. Now, it's true that ambassadors don't make policy. Policy is decided in Washington. And it's true that none of this may actually happen. Maybe he won't be confirmed. Maybe he won't be able to do the things that he says he does. But this is a signal, a strong signal, that Trump intends to do a lot of things very differently. Not just a phone call with the president of Taiwan, but other things, including interesting and important symbolic but important policy changes right here in the Middle East. And a second surprise, just today, just this morning, was to read that Donald Trump, at one of his victory rallies in Pennsylvania this time, said that he wanted to support a safe zone in Syria. What does he mean by that? I don't know, and maybe he doesn't know. But what he is doing by saying that he wants to do this is to emphasize that he is going to start right away doing things differently from what Obama did or didn't do. And that's a strong tradition in recent American transitions, to come into power and show the world that you are not the other guy, that you are, if you're Bush, that you're not Clinton, if you're Obama, that you're not Bush, and now if you're Trump, that you're not Obama, that you are going to do things differently right from the start. So, having gotten that off my chest, as we say, I want to talk more broadly about long-term changes that, even if very hard to predict, as I just said, I still would be willing to bet are on the horizon for the future of this region. Okay, one is the continued rise of Russia as a significant player in the Middle East. I'm not saying that Russia is a new superpower or that the United States is going to walk away from the Middle East. I don't think either of those things is true. But I am saying that I think the Russians are making a strong play to become an important power in this region, which they call, as you probably know, the near abroad. It's their backyard in some sense. We've seen that, of course, in Syria, but we are also seeing signs that the Russians may try to extend their influence beyond to new countries or old friends that they had in the region, like Egypt, like Libya, maybe Iraq. And it is true that Russian power is limited, and Russian resources are limited. But in some kind of informal alliance with Iran and with other friends that they may look for in the region, they can be expected, I think, to continue to play a significant role in the next few years, as they have in just the past few years, in a way that we haven't seen in almost a generation. Second, I think that unfortunately, even more unfortunately, that the rapprochement that we saw in 2012 and 2013 and 2014 between the government of Turkey and the Kurds, and I don't mean just the Kurds here in Iraqi Kurdistan, but the Kurds overall in Syria and inside Turkey, that rapprochement is now a thing of the past. And unfortunately, I predict that in the medium term, we are likely to see continued hostility between the government of Turkey and its own Kurds inside that country and the Kurds in Syria, but not the Kurds here in Iraqi Kurdistan, who have become Turkey's best friends in the region, and I think likely to stay that way. There are some people, including one of my good colleagues at the Washington Institute, where I work back home, who think that maybe Erdogan can switch again after he succeeds in the Turkish elections coming up next year, that Erdogan can switch again back to a policy of supporting a peace process with the Turkish Kurds and back to a policy of an entente, at least an understanding, with the Syrian Kurds as well. That's possible, but I think unlikely, unfortunately. So that's an issue that is going to bedevil you in your relations with other Kurds in the region, and the United States in its attempt to somehow be friends both with Turkey and with the Syrian Kurds, and to do something in order to avoid further escalation in Turkey's internal conflict with the PKK. Iran is a rising power as well in the region. Partly that's because of the nuclear deal, but partly, let's face it, it's because Iran is a major country with a very large population, a strong government, strong security forces, and a solid economic and technological base, and a religious appeal across its borders to other Muslims, and of course, particularly, we might as well just say it out loud, particularly to Shiite Muslims in Iraq, in Syria, in Lebanon, in Yemen, in Bahrain, and in other places around the region. And Iran is not going to stop, is not going to moderate, is not going to give up its ambition to become the leading Muslim power in the world and the leading regional power in the Middle East. It's not 10 feet tall, it's not a superpower, but it is a major challenge to your interests, in my view, and to American interests in the region, and to others in the region, to Arabs in the Gulf, to Israel, obviously, and to others as well. And so this is going to continue to be an issue that will become even more, in my view, dangerous and unpredictable in the next few years than it has been in the past few years. Now let me bring you what I think is the good news, okay? I think that terrorism is on the decline. I think that Daesh, in particular, is on the ropes, not dead, probably not going to die completely, but to be defeated in both Iraq and eventually, before too much longer, in Syria and in Libya and in other places in the region where it has managed to establish a presence. And I think that what is, in my view, the overemphasis on terrorism as the most important threat that we all face, and that the United States in particular faces in the region, will gradually diminish as the threat itself diminishes over the next few years. I'm not saying that terrorism will stop. I am saying that it will no longer be viewed as the most important issue in the region. It's going to take a few more years for that to happen, but I think it will happen, and that is good news. I think also that the era of chaos in spreading from one Middle Eastern country, particularly from one Arab country to another, is probably coming to an end. I don't see that there will be another Arab Spring anytime soon, or that the stability that somehow the Gulf Arab countries and even smaller, poorer Arab countries like Jordan or Lebanon, despite millions of refugees, despite civil wars all around them, I don't see that that stability is in any imminent jeopardy. And so I think we are going back to an era in the future, at least in the near future, when the kind of stability or stagnation, if you want to call it that, that was typical of Middle East countries before the Arab Spring will again become the norm, except for the countries that are already in the midst of civil war, like Syria or Yemen or Libya. In those countries, I don't see a resolution of those ongoing conflicts anytime soon. So what you're likely to have in the future, I'm guessing here, remember, is the same pattern, more or less, that we see today. Some countries somehow managing, and I put Iraq actually in that category, managing despite everything to remain more or less intact, and other countries that have already fallen victim to complete chaos and civil war, not being able to pull themselves back together. Democracy. How many minutes? 10 more minutes. That's great. No, I'm joking. Okay, democracy. Forget about it, as we used to say in Brooklyn. This is not going to be an important issue for American policy in the region, and I think it's not going to be an important issue for most people in the region who have become, in the last few years, more interested in stability and safety, security, and economic survival than they are in grand ideals of democracy. I'm sad about this phenomenon, personally, but I think we have to recognize it for what it is. And now I want to just conclude with a few comments about what I think, at least, all of this might mean for Kurdistan. I think that one of the key issues for you that hasn't been talked about too much because many people are a little nervous to talk about it openly is, what about Iran? What about Iran and its influence right here in Kurdistan and among your near neighbors? Many people wonder if the issue of independence for Kurdistan depends most of all on how Iran would react to that. In Baghdad, in terms of influencing the Baghdad government's dealings with this issue, and right here in Kurdistan, in terms of influencing the way various political parties or militias or leaders or popular sentiment or the economy, how that would fare if Kurdistan declared independence or moved toward independence in the face of possible Iranian objections. And that means that the issue of how the United States will respond to Iran's response to your possible moves toward independence becomes a crucial variable. Will the United States... You came at just the right moment. Will the United States, in this new anti-Iranian Trump administration, will the United States be willing to offer Kurdistan serious guarantees of security and economic survival, even if Iran turns very hostile to you, for whatever reason? And if the United States is willing to offer such guarantees, and I don't mean just words, I mean real actions on the ground, if the United States does do that, will Iran in turn view that as even more reason to oppose your independence and your freedom of action because of perceived threats from this new American-Kurdish alliance? These are huge questions with enormous consequences for all of us. And I'm going to tell you, honestly, as I said at the very beginning of my presentation, that I don't know the answer to these questions. But what I would simply suggest in conclusion is that don't take the answers for granted. The Trump administration, in particular, anti-Iran as it is, and pro-Kurdish as it is, or is likely to be, is also, in my view, more interested in internal American policy than in foreign policy, and not interested at all in another huge American commitment of manpower and resources to some conflict in the faraway Middle East or anywhere in the world. And so this issue, Iran, the United States, and the Kurds, is the one that I think deserves our most urgent attention and careful consideration in the years to come. Thank you so much for your attention.
وك كارول وك ديفيد منش لزماني إنجليزي كصدقهم ببورا بلام أما بومين وبوتو زوباشترا. It's an honor, it's a privilege to address you. I hope you'll find that I have something useful to offer. I want to start by saying that, first of all, I personally agree with the sentiments we especially heard yesterday about the opportunities, and especially the window of opportunity for Kurdish independence that's existing right now. Now, I don't think this window is likely to get better or remain open forever. But there's another part of our title for our conference today, and that's challenges, and I'd like to focus a bit more on those, as my fellow panelists have been doing this morning. I think I'm going to do something sneaky also while I do the talk. I'll tell you what it is at the end. But I want to discuss challenges, and when we do that, we look at especially regional issues. Syria isn't able to project power in any meaningful sense right now. The Gulf countries have not been as effective or able to exert power in Iraq as well as others. We saw this especially after the 2010 election, when their preferred candidate, even though his party won the most votes, was not able to form a government. So I want to focus on Turkey and Iran here. Now, starting with Turkey. Turkey has strong strategic and economic reasons for tying itself to the Kurdistan region of Iraq with Bashul. I think Turkey and Bashul's interests coincide in many important respects, and so I think that the relationship is beyond a temporary marriage, but rather more strategic. And I've published about this in Middle East Policy and other publications. So what does Turkey want? Turkey wants, of course, a better economy for itself. That's been a mainstay of the AKP's rise to power and its maintenance of power. And we should note that 70% of Turkey's investments in Iraq are actually in the Kurdistan region of Iraq, as a rough estimate. So it's got a big stake here economically. Turkey wants gas. Turkey powers its electric grid through gas. It needs other supplies of gas so as not to be overly dependent on Russia, where it gets the overwhelming majority of its gas. Iraqi Kurdistan has gas. And with gas, it takes a long time to put in place pipelines, infrastructure, make agreements, and so forth. And we've seen Turkey as early as 2009, if you read the WikiLeaks releases, deciding to throw its lot in with the Kurdistan region of Iraq to a significant extent. Turkey's needs for electricity are going up exponentially. It's not discovering more gas domestically, and you need to plan these things long ahead of time. So Turkey can't be hostage to Russia or limited supplies, and needs to diversify its gas. And I think that's been a major interest for Turkey to become closer to the Kurdistan region. Especially Baghdad never had a huge interest or focus on its gas resources, on the gas resources of Iraq. It was more focused on oil, whereas the Kurdistan region has been paying attention to gas to some extent. I can say more about it in the question period if you wish. Europe also wants gas, by the way, and Turkey can be a transit point for any excess supply. So big reasons there. Turkey also wants someone to help it contain the PKK. Might as well just say that. There's some daylight between different Kurdish movements, and we know this, and so this could be a confluence of interest. So for all these reasons, Ankara is a important and more strategic than ephemeral partner for the KRG, but at the same time, I wouldn't go so far as to say that Ankara is a reliable partner for the KRG. I know it sounds like a contradiction, but we remember August 2014, when Daesh was threatening this area. It wasn't Turkey who came in time to help, but it was rather Iran and various Kurdish parties from all the different parts of Kurdistan. Now, so I guess I would echo some of Ambedin Zaman and Cengiz Candal's comments from yesterday, that despite everything I just said, we also have to pay attention to possible changes in Turkey. For now, I think that Turkey, for the reasons I just cited, is actually reconcilable to Bashuri independence, which is remarkable. This is not something we would have actually ever expected to see, but I think they could conceivably live with it, but that might change. Turkey, like other political actors, experiences significant changes, and we see instability not just on the horizon, but in Turkey now. So since I've only got 10 minutes, thank you, fellow panelists. It's okay, I didn't have more than 10 minutes to say anyhow. I'm going to go on to Iran. Now, I was going to say that Iran is a bit the elephant in the room, because we didn't discuss it much yesterday, but my fellow panelists have, like me, seen the necessity of discussing Iran, because we're talking about challenges here. And what I'm going to say is going to echo a little bit what David said, who stole some of my wind, but we discussed it yesterday evening. We knew that we were going to do that. What does Iran want, and what will it do? This is what you ask when you're trying to examine these things, and new eventualities like Kurdistani independence. So we need to explore it, and we need to explore it honestly. Again, I started by saying that I'm very much in favor of the opinions expressed by Peter Galbraith or Bernard Kouchner and others yesterday about Kurdistani independence. I think now's the time and so forth, but I'm also leery, as I'm sure my fellow speakers from yesterday are leery, to come here as outsiders and say this, because in the end, although I've been living here since September 3rd, it's not my permanent home. I don't have to live with the consequences. My family doesn't live here. But of course, once again, as Peter Galbraith mentioned yesterday, there's also risks from remaining in Iraq. So we're trying to keep both of these in mind, and I hope you'll accept my comments in the right way. When I talk about challenges, Iran is what comes to mind the most. Iran, what does it want? What will it do? Well, it doesn't want an independent Kurdistan on its doorstep, especially one that will be likely to be on very friendly terms with states and actors that Iran and its current configuration as the Islamic Republic considers its enemies. This is just how Iran sees things. Iran also has a lot of levers, tools, especially in Iraq. It has influence with several Bashuri parties, South Kurdistani parties here. It has influence with the PKK. It has influence with Baghdad. It can prevent negotiated independence with Baghdad. Iran could exert influence with Baghdad to prevent the ideal outcome of a negotiated Kurdistani independence. It can push Kurdistani parties, especially in Soleimani, on many issues. It can sow instability. Again, like David said, I don't want to make out that Iran is 20 feet tall or 10 feet tall, but these are serious issues. Iran can blockade the Kurdistani region. If it does so in tandem with Turkey, then there's a problem. It can turn off the energy taps if Kurdistan is exporting. There's different ways Iran could do this. It's something worth discussing and exploring. And if we're, Iran's also, I said, well, what does it want? It also wants a corridor probably to the Mediterranean. We see it's involved in this competition with Turkey, who's always been its rival. Really, I don't see Saudi Arabia, due to its small population, as a real contender for hegemony in the region. I don't see Egypt, due to its economic Achilles heel, as a real contender for hegemony. Israel's too unpopular and too small as well, although it's got military prowess. So we're really just talking about Turkey and Iran, and they've always been in competition. Think back to the Ottoman Empire and Persian, this is not a new story. And Iran wants to pursue that competition. And it's got visions of a Shiite crescent, a corridor to the Mediterranean. These are all things that Kurdistani independence could cause problems for. So now in conclusion, because I've got how many minutes? Oh, you got to give me at least 2. Okay. Notice how I talked about Turkey and Iran. I talked about their national interests. I talked about them as if they were unitary actors pursuing their objectives within their means. Now, what about Kurdistan? If I talk about Kurdistan, can I talk about Kurdistan the same way? At times I could. At other times, not so much. As former Minister Hoshyar Zebari mentioned yesterday, when the Kurds are united, there's a lot they can accomplish. They tend to get what they want. When they're not, it's a different story. So can we talk about Kurdistani national interests? These are always for any actor: security, economic welfare, wealth, power. But there's also more specific things that are enduring national interests as opposed to ephemeral ones. And when we look at Kurdistan, there are many things that I heard today, yesterday, at the Mary conference in October, from my talks with different political parties, that make me conclude that all the Kurdistani parties agree that independence is a national interest of Kurdistan. They disagree about when or how or the timing. Now, if so, there are ways to inoculate Kurdistan partially from the agendas of others who don't share that natural interest, unsurprisingly. And there's ways to establish more red lines for what other powers can have parties in Kurdistan do. For instance, there's a red line nowadays that did not exist in the 90s about Kurdistani parties fighting each other. That's not acceptable anymore. Those were things of the desperate days, the darkest days of the mid-1990s. That's a red line that no party's really willing to cross, or I hope it remains so. But there's other red lines that are possible. If you clearly specify the national interest and that it is for independence, then you can expand these red lines. How can you clearly specify the national interest? There's tools available. You can go directly to the people rather than the parties to define the national interest. We call that a referendum. Once you've played the card of referendum, the people's will about the national interest is clear. It becomes much more difficult for other parties, no matter what pressure or influence they're under, to deviate from that line. As I've written in many of my Rudao columns, I think the time for a referendum is around now. You can pursue intermediate goals as well to mollify others like Baghdad, Iran, and other countries, however, and we call that confederation. The difference being that sovereignty would lie within Kurdistan and be devolved to Baghdad as Kurdistan wishes, rather than federalism, whereas sovereignty resides in Baghdad and would go to Kurdistan. It would be independence. It would be a safe face-saving measure for authorities in Baghdad to possibly come to a compromise. It could mollify Iran and some others. So with clearly specified national interests, you can help prevent Kurdistani parties from acting against that national interest. For example, you might talk to them about voting for a budget that might not be in Kurdistani interests. Now, I'll let them speak for themselves, but my first look at this budget is less money for Kurdistan and less autonomy for Kurdistan. If you phrase this in terms of national interest, you can have a very hard discussion. I'm sure they have a response for this. I haven't had a chance to speak to them yet, but that's the kind of discussion you have. I'm not going to pronounce myself on whether that budget vote was against the interest. That's not a discussion for outsiders. That's a discussion for Kurds, but I'm giving you an example of the kind of discussion you can have. You can talk about, as you do this, you need to, however, mollify the various parties of Kurdistan. This is my last point, I promise. To get them behind the national interest, to get them to toe to the line, to be unified, like a few years ago when there was a Kurdistani alliance in Baghdad all voting together, because foreign policy includes Baghdad if our national interest is Kurdistani independence. When all the Kurdish parties are together on a united list, they're towing the line and so forth and presenting one face to the world like Iran and Turkey does in my example above. There's ways to get them back into the fold if divisions have now emerged. One of those ways is to mollify them about where budgets are going to go, to give them clear rights to a certain portion of the budget in Kurdistan. Another way is decentralization for many of the same reasons that it was good for Iraq in a federal system that was tried and failed. It could be good for Kurdistan. These are all assurances you can give to other Kurdistani parties to get them behind the national interest and keep them there, and to establish red lines that inoculate them from the interest of other countries who have different agendas. Thank you.
I would like to thank all the panelists for being so interesting and punctual. So we are left with just 15 minutes. I'm going to skip my own questions and I'll let the people ask. Yes, please. Mike?
Thank you very much. Good morning to all. Excellent panel. Thank you for the panelists. I'm Haja Sindi from University of Kurdistan, Hawler. I teach business, but I deal with politics, so I kind of, if I'm modest, I would say I understand somehow how the elect president thinks. My first question is to Dr. O'Leary. It's good that you said the administration in the United States thinks like business-like, and that is good. I understand that. But how can that come, not contradicting with the fact that they want to intervene in Middle East? To have business, you need a stable environment there. Does that mean business from chaos or business from stability eventually? That's one. And I praise what you said in terms of the management style of Trump. I know he asks people, he teams up, but then he makes the decision. Would that mean eventually that he might take some decisions individually, eventually, or not? My second question is to Dr. Pollack over here. I appreciate that you said, I guess. Do you think if we follow the business model, which we did in KRG, definitely at some point, but then oil prices went down and other things happened, like IDPs and so, if we work more on introducing ourselves as a strong business model over it, besides counterterrorism, would that attract more the Trump administration? Because ecosystem theory says competitors get in love with each other, actually. They are afraid of it, but they will have that respect for us. And finally, my second...
No, please, we need to have
comment,
some other
to David Romano,
opportunities
thank you.
to others.
I agree with you 100%, and thank you very much for that proposal, and I think we should go behind a kind of referendum to bring people together, their point of views. Thank you very much. Thank you.
So we'll collect a few questions and then, please.
Hi, everyone. I'm Shaheen. I had opportunity to have a short talk during dinner last night with both Davids, and I'm glad you just outlined Iran's influence. Okay, we had a short discussion last night during dinner with both Davids. I'm glad you discussed Iran and its influence over Iraq's policies. And also, Peter, yesterday we talked quite in favor of looking at risks rather than opportunities. You discussed the possible risks for the Kurdistan, future Kurdistan independent. How about the risk of remaining part of Iraq? I mean, from Iranian perspective, how this will probably pose some risks if remaining a part of Iraq. پرسیارێکیش بۆ پرۆفسۆر ئالادین دەستت خۆش بێ دیارە کاتەکەی زۆر کەم بوو بەڵام هەر تاکیدم ئێوە باسوە کرد بەڵام زۆر بە جوانی باسی کاریگەریەکانی ئێرانت کرد لە 10 ساڵی ڕابردوو وەکو ئەکتەرێکی سەرەکی لەم ناوچەیەدا. ئەبێ ئێمە چ بکەین؟ ئێمە وەکو کوردستانە بێ چۆن تەعاملی لەگەرا بکەین؟ ئایا پرسیارەوەیە تەعاملکردن لەگەر ئێران بەو مانای چۆن بڵێ کەوتنە ژێر کاریگەریەکانی سیاسەتیان یان دەتوانن تێگەیشتنێکی تەعاملێکی دروست هەبێتن لە بینی یەکتری؟ وسپاس. Either David, whoever wants to respond to my question.
Please. Over there. Yes, over there. And then you.
زۆر سپاس. من عابدم لە زانکۆی ئەمریکیش نیم پێشمەرگەی حیزبی دموکراتی کوردستانی ئێرانم. تێبینیم لەسەر قسەکانی دکتۆرە عەلادین هەبوو کە باز لە سەربەخۆیی دەکرێت هەمیشە باز لە ئاستەنگەکانی دەکرێت یەکەمین شت ئێران یعنی ئێران بووەتە وڵاتی ئاستەنگ لە نێو خۆشیدا یعنی نەبووەتە وڵاتی فرسەتەکان کە فرسەت بدات تەنانەت بە خەڵکی خۆشی لە نێو خۆی فرسەت نادا چ بگا بە ئەوەی کە بیهەیە بە وڵاتی دیکە یا وڵاتانی دەوروبەری خۆی فرسەت دا کەوا بوو هەمیشە وڵاتی ئاستەنگەکانە ئەوەی کە جەنابەت باست کرد ئەو هاوڕێشمان ئێستا باسی کرد جەنابەت باسی ئەوەت کرد کە دەبێت تەعامل بکەین لەگەڵ ئێران نەک ئینکاری بکەین ئەمنێش دەکرێت بڵێن ناکرێ ئینکار بکرێ ئێران بەڵام بەو شێوازە بۆ ئەقلیەتەی کە ئێستا کۆماری ئیسلامی هەیەتی ناکرێت تەعاملیشی لەگەڵ بکرێ ئێران هەر وەک دەبینین ئێستا لە عێراق دەستێوەردانی کردو و دەسەڵاتی هەیە لە سووریا دەسەڵاتی هەیە ئەگەڵ ئەوانە وەکو هێز باس بکەین کە ئێران وڵاتێکە کە هێزی هەیە بەڵێ لەو بوارەوە کە هەمیشە ماڵوێرانی و ئاژاوە و ئەوانە لە خۆی دوورەخاتەوە بۆ وڵاتانی دەوروبەری خۆی یانە شەڕ لە خۆی دوورەخاتەوە لە عێراق دەسەڵاتی هەیە لە سووریا دەسەڵاتی هەیە لەگەڵ حیزبوڵڵا کە بە قەول پوڵ و پارە و چەک و چۆڵی بۆ دابین دەکات بەو شێوازە تەعامل دەکات لە یەمەن لەگەڵ حوسیەکانە هەر بۆ شێوازە یانە کارێکی کردووە کە شەڕ و ئاژاوەی لە خۆی دوورخستووەتەوە بۆی کە دەسەڵاتی خۆی بەو شێوازە نیشان بدات کەوابوو من پێم وابێ بەو ئەقلیەتەی کە کۆماری ئیسلامی هەیەتی نابێ بەو شێوە تەعاملی لەگەڵ بکرێ دەبێت کارێ بکرێت کە
please. Question.
تێبینی بوو قسەکانی من تێبینی زۆر سپاس.
Okay. The last one in this round, please. The lady over there.
Hi, my name is Nuha Siraj, and I'm the Public Relations and Marketing Manager here. My question is geared toward more the American speakers that we have. As an American, I've always been interested in lobbying efforts, but unfortunately, I think... Can you hear me?
No.
No?
Closer, yeah.
Like this? Okay. As an American, I've always been interested in lobbying efforts abroad, and as constituents, we've been very engaged in lobbying efforts. However, as a united front, I haven't seen much of it in these states. So, can you talk a little bit about the lobbying efforts that we have ongoing right now?
Okay.
Thank you.
Okay.
Yeah.
So,
For you?
you can start answering.
Okay.
And
Yeah.
we'll have another
Okay.
round of
Okay.
time.
Sure.
All right. The first question from Professor Cindy. I didn't get to that part of my presentation, but Trump has a two-part paradigm that is inconsistent, but I believe will be carried out. On foreign policy, stability, not chaos. Happy with autocrats, not messy democracy. And I still believe that his key advisors, like Flynn, are tacking toward Egypt to take the pull of Saudi as the center of the Arab world away from Saudi. On his personal style, yes, he takes all these decisions in. They're very conflicting. There'll be a big row among his advisors. And as the chief adjudicator, he will make his own decision. So that's my response. It's further outlined in the part of the paper I didn't get to read. On lobbying, I think you're very well, you have a wonderful representative in Washington, D.C., Bayan Han, and you have an active Kurdish caucus in Congress, and you have many, many friends and a strong lobbying effort. I would simply suggest that under a Trump administration, you may want to shake up your lobbying a little bit and look for people that actually know Donald Trump, as opposed to the old-fashioned Republicans who have been lobbying forever in D.C., who don't know Trump and don't like him. So that's my answer there.
Okay, thank you for your questions. I think I'll hand over the Iran question to you, David, if that's all right. But I want to address the question about Kurdistan as a model of business, and I think that's a great idea. I think, as I was hinting in my presentation, that in my personal opinion, for what it's worth, your value in counterterrorism is crucial right now, but it's a dwindling asset. It's not going to last much longer than the next year or two, in my judgment. So you need something new. And the business model with your oil resources, with your economic reforms, with your openness and friendliness to the United States and to American business is something that would be very attractive to the Trump administration, definitely. On the one other point that was raised, I think, at least in the background of several questions, is something that I want to mention now, which is that what's happened in the last 2 or 3 years, as the United States seemed to be pulling back from the Middle East, Middle Eastern countries started to take the initiative in their own hands in ways that we haven't seen maybe ever in history. The Saudis, the Emiratis, other countries, the Turks, they started doing things, intervening across their borders militarily, or taking major diplomatic initiatives that I think were partly in reaction to their view that nobody else was going to do it anymore. The United States wasn't going to do it for them. Now, the Obama administration tended to view that as a problem. But I think the Trump administration is likely to view that as an opportunity, as a good thing. Why should the United States have to do everything for all these other countries? Why can't they do more for themselves in cooperation with the United States, but do it, take the initiative, pay for it, make the sacrifices. Don't wait for the United States to take the lead. That, I think, will be the attitude of the Trump administration, so long as you don't surprise them. Talk to them first, and then act.
May I just make one count? I do, with all respect, disagree on the idea that your importance as a counterterrorism ally will diminish, particularly given the fact that the Arab Sunni community of Iraq remains disenfranchised and essentially cut off from the Baghdad government in terms of any real political power. And this, to me, means that new generations of ISIS, under other names, will continue to evolve in Anbar, the parts of Nineveh that are overwhelmingly Arab Sunni, and in Salahuddin, and this will not be resolved until the Baghdad government, the Iran-backed Baghdad government, is able to find a mechanism for the Sunnis to have a place in Iraq. And if you remember, Maliki said, basically in Arabic, over my dead body will the Arab Sunnis ever get a federalism like the Kurds have. So what is left to the Arab Sunnis other than to turn to Salafism and terrorism, which means counterterrorism will continue to be a critical role for the Kurds as our allies and our friends. And that's my view based on my work with Central Command in Tampa.
Thank you. لە قسەکانی خۆمدا وستم شتێک بەیان بکەم کەەوە لەمە دووە نظامی شەرقی ئەوسەد تەنها واشنگتن بڕیار لەسەر نادا. ئێمە دەبێت تەرکیزی گەورە بکەینە سەر واشنگتن بۆ لۆبی، بەڵام تەنها وڵات نییە کە دینامیکێت و بڕیار و شێوازی نظامی میدل ئیست ئۆردەری نوێ ئەمریکا بڕیار لەسەر نادا. رووسیا هاتۆتەوە مەیدان، سێ زەرهێزی ناوچەیی ئیقلیمی لەو 25 ساڵە سەریان هەڵداوە. وەکو شەڕی سارد و سەدەی ڕابردوو نییە، دەبێ ئەوانە تەرکیزیان بکەینە سەرێ، تیان بگەین، لۆبیان لەناو بکەین، بزانین بڕیاردان لە ناویان چۆنە. لە ژێر ئەو وڵاتانەشەوە و لە ژێر وڵاتانیش سەبستەیت ئاکتەرز کە دەکا ئەو هەموو هێزە نادەوڵەتیانە دەور پشتمانن، ئەوانش بڕیاردەرن لەسەر حتا دەوڵەتی کوردی، بڕیاردەرن لەسەر سیاغەکردنی مجلیس ئۆردە، دەبێ بزانین چۆن تەعاملیان دەکردین. بۆ ئێمە دەبێت پرۆژەمان هەبێت، پرۆسەمان هەبێت. ئێمە پێویستە کەمتر زیاتر باس لە خواست بکەین، باس لە تەمۆح بکەین، زیاتر بکەین لەسەر پرۆسە، پرۆژە، لە هەر وڵاتێک چی بکەین، لە چەندین لاوەکاری لەسەر بکەین، لەگەر سەبستەیت ئاکتەرەکان، لەگەر حەشتی شەعبی چی بکەین، لەگەر ئەو هێرشە ئەو جموجۆڵەی لە عێراق دروست دەبێت کە ڕەنگە ئەگەر ئێرانیش بڕیاری سیاسی لە عێراق نەستان بێ، ئەو هێزن غێرە دەوڵەتیانە قورقورتۆکی عێراق دەگرن، بڕیاری سیاسی لە عێراق بە ئەسیر دەگرن، بڕیاری سیاسی لە سووریا، لە لوبنان، لە یەمەن لەوانە دەگرن. دەبێ حساب ئەوانە بکەین. کەواتە لە کاتی بڕیاردان، لە کاتی کارکردن، لە کاتی پرۆژە دروستکردن دەبێ ئەو هێزە بە قووەتانە لەبیر نەکەین. شتێکی تریش حەزەکەم من متفق نیمە لەگەرە و بەڕێزانە هەرسێکی ئەمریکی وەبزانم. ئەوان زۆر بە ڕەشوسپی سەیری ئێران دەکەن، وەکو بێ ئێران یەک وەحدەیە، یەک سەرچاوی بڕیارە و یەک سیاسەتیشە، وەکو بڵێ وەکو سەرچاوی خەتەریش سەیری کوردستانی عێراق دەکەن. لە ڕاستیدا ئێران وانییە. ئێران زۆر بە هونەرمەندانەتر پێچراوەتەوە، زۆر سۆفیستیکیتد بە ئینگلیزی پێڵێن. پرۆسەی بڕیاردا لە ناو ئێراندا ڕەشوسپی نییە. ئێمە توانای ئەوەمانە هەیە لە خەڵکی تر زیاتر لە ئێران تێبگەین. ئێران وا ڕەشوسپی بیر ناکات و ئێران یەکەمین دەوڵەت بوو کە قونسولیەتی لە هەولێر و لە سلێمانی کردەوە بەبێ بترسێ. ئەو وەختە خەڵک تەسەووری نەبوو ئاعترافێکی وا بکرێ یان قۆنسەل بکرێ. ئێستا ئێمە وا تەسەوور دەکەین ئێران یەکەم دەوڵەتە لە دژی دەوڵەتی کوردی بۆستێ، بەڵام وانییە ئەگەر کورد بتوانێت ئێران دڵنیا بکە کە کوردستانی ئازاد سەرچاوەیەکی خەتەر نییە بۆ ئەمنی قەومی ئەوان، نابتە ئیسرائیلی دووەم بۆیە، حدودی ئیسرائیل و ئەمریکا ناهێنتە سەر ئینە، ئێران مشکلەی نییە لەوەی تۆ بەڕاستی ئێران مشکلەی لەگەر وەحدەی عێراقیش نییە، ئێران مشکلەی لەگەر مەد و عمقی سونی هەیە، لەگەر ئەجندای ئەمریکی و غەربی هەیە، لەگەر ئیسرائیل هەیە. ئێران ترسی گەورەی لە ڕسمە گەورەکەیە، بەڵام کوردستانی قەت بە خەتەرێکی وا نەبینەوە چونکە دەزانی لە بەردەستێتی ئەتوانێت کێشەیە بە دروستکە. و حتا کە دەڵێن کوردی ئێرانیش لەبەر کوردی ئێران حەز ناکە کوردی عێراق دەعمکە، ئەمەش ڕاست نییە. ئێران زۆر کەمتر ئێستا ترسی لە معارەزەی هەیە، ئەو معارەزەیە کە هەبوو نەماوە. بەعکسەوە توانای ئەوەی هەیە کە سیاست بگۆڕی مامەلە لەگەر معارەزە بکە. ئێمە ناتوانین بڵین لە جیاتی ئێران بیرکەینەوە یان مامەلی لەگەر بکەین. ئێران ئێرانە، ئێران ئەجندای خۆی هەیە، ئێران ئیشی خۆی دەکات، بەڵام بێگومان ئەو خوێندنەوەی غەربی بۆ ئێران بەو شێوەزە ڕۆشوسپیە ڕاست نییە. ئێران دەتوانیت تەسیر لە بڕیاری بکەیت، لۆبی لە ئێران بکەیت، دەتوانیت دڵنیای بکەیت، چونکە ئەو دەوڵەتی کوردی وەکو خودی دەوڵەت بە خەتەر نابینی، بەڵام کیانەکە ئەگەر بوو بە سەرچاوەیەک بۆ خەتەر بخۆی قسای بۆ دەکات. ئێمە دەبێت کە پرۆژەی بڵین پرۆژەی دەوڵەتی کوردی پرۆسەی دەوڵەتی کوردی دادنەی لە هەموو لایەکەوە دەبیکاری بۆ بکەیت لە هەموو لایەکەوە تێبگەی ئەو هێزانەی سیاغەی میدل ئیست ئۆردەر دەکەن چێن ئەوانەی بڕیار دەگۆڕن چێن ئەوانەی تەئسیر لە بڕیاری دەرەچی و ناوچی دەکەن لەگەر هەموویاندا مامەلە بکەیت کە بتوانی بیانینە سەرخەت پشتگیری بۆ خۆت زیاد بکەیت لە ناوێ.
In my comments, can everyone hear me? Yes? Good. In my comments, I kind of intentionally overplayed the risks vis-a-vis Iran. I actually hope you're right, Dinoa. I very much do. Now, regarding the risks of staying in Iraq, look, we don't have to make it up. Let's just look at what happened when Baghdad was weak in the 1920s as Iraq was being formed and the promises made to the Kurds. Let's look at when Qasim first took power, what was it, 1958?
58.
When he was weak and he needed friends, namely Mullah Mustafa Barzani, who he called back from the Soviet Union. And then what happened once he was stronger and started to feel more capable of moving against the Kurds. Let's look at what Baghdad did when it was weak in, say, 1966 with the Bazaz Declaration versus what happened later after another coup. Let's look at Baghdad when it was weak in 1970 and the promises that Vice President Saddam Hussein made at the time versus what they did once they felt stronger. I don't need to lay this out too much. There is a counter-argument that this isn't the same Iraq, but given the lack of power sharing and the intentional abrogation of elements of the Constitution, I'm not so sure this isn't the same Iraq as before. Oh, I have one last thing. The sneaky thing I did, by the way, that I mentioned I was going to do at the beginning of my talk, I snuck international relations academic theories into my talk. You may not know it, but neorealism and unitary rational actors and states and so forth. So you got some even though you didn't want some.
Thank you very much. Please remain seated. We are going immediately to the next session, and welcome.
Thank you.